Hey, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. And if you haven't already done so, please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. I am the author of the book The Only Witness, a Christian historical fiction tracing a possible history of the Shroud over the last 2 millennia. Today we're speaking with Larry Stalley, and he is a Shroud researcher, biblical scholar, and also an author. And he's got a very recent book. So let me just tell you a little bit about him. So as I mentioned, he's a longtime researcher, written a bunch of different papers on biblical references to the Shroud in the Bible and elsewhere. He'll be speaking at the upcoming Shroud Conference taking place in St. Louis, and that's going to be at the end of July, July 30th till August 3rd. And of course, he has a new book that just launched just in the last few days, and it's called A Divine Testimony for the Resurrection. And definitely looking forward to hearing more about it and reading about it. And so, Larry, welcome. So good to have you.
Well, thank you, Guy. It's so good to be with you. I'm excited to present some of what the Lord has shown me concerning the Holy Shroud and the biblical text. I think it's going to be an exciting program for your listeners, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about a recent paper that you wrote. It's called The Sign of Jonah. But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your book and what that's all about?
Well, as you've alluded to, I've spent 6 or 7 years of intense study on the biblical text, several passages that have puzzled theologians, Bible scholars for centuries, where we just don't really know the solution to these texts. And we're going to look at one, possibly two of those passages, one of them being the Sign of Jonah. And there's 8, maybe 10 different proposed explanations for what that sign was that you can look to the critical commentaries, but there's no consensus. And all of those proposed solutions have problems. And I believe that the solution is found in the image on the shroud.
Yeah, and that does make a lot of sense. And I've read your paper, well, a couple of your papers, but certainly the more recent one, The Sign of Jonah, and kind of very interesting. So let's dig right in. It's Jonah is a topic. My grandson is named Jonah, and he doesn't quite understand the story yet of the whale, or of the Leviathan, but we're gonna definitely get to that and with him. But so tell us a little bit about your paper, the Sign of Jonah, and then why you believe the image on the shroud is the Sign of Jonah.
Yeah, and I think the upshot of this will be that Matthew was aware of what we call the Shroud of Turin today, that it actually existed in his own day. I think that's what my exegetical work will help to demonstrate, that we don't just have to rely on science and historical artifacts, but actually the Bible testifies to this linen cloth actually being the authentic cloth of Christ. So what really got me interested in these texts was a comment by John Calvin. He wrote a treatise on relics and wasn't favorable towards this linen shroud. And he gave a couple of reasons why he did not think it was authentic. And one was, surely the biblical writers, the 4 Gospels, would have made mention of this image if it was genuine. And I thought, that sounds like a good argument. It seemed like a formidable challenge. And so I think Calvin didn't consider a hypothesis such that there's a reason why the gospel writers may have intentionally not made reference to the image in an explicit way, and that is because of persecution. Jesus said, don't give that which is holy to the dogs, and don't cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them underfoot, turn and tear you to pieces. What would have been holier to the early Christians than this burial shroud of their Lord, stained with his precious redeeming blood? And so we have the warning from Christ himself not to be careful, don't give your pearls to swine. And so to safeguard the shroud, it may be that intentionally the canonical writers did not make explicit mention of this image, lest it be hunted down and maybe confiscated and harmed by enemies. So that's my hypothesis, is that any reference to it is done in a cryptic, hidden or veiled manner. And one of these is the sign of Jonah. So we have this typological metaphor that's actually mentioned twice in the first gospel, chapter 12, verses 38 and following, and then 4 chapters later, chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. And as an exegete, there's questions I ask myself, such as, well, why does he mention it a second time? What purpose does that serve? And it's not readily apparent why he brings it up again 4 chapters later. But we want to focus primarily on the first reference in chapter 12. And regarding John Calvin's statement, there came to be in the early church what came to be known as the discipline of the secret. Between these two passages, Jesus talks about the mysteries of the kingdom of God and how they weren't given to the common people, but he says I'm explaining these mysteries of the parables to you, but they're not given to the common person. And there were reasons, he said, their hearts are hardened. And so I think that the discipline of the secret may very well have applied to the image on the shroud. All right, so what we have, I believe, are 4 canonical writers, Matthew, Paul, John, and the writer of Hebrews, that all have at least one hidden reference, a cryptic reference. It's really quite strong in each of them. And so we want to focus on the sign of Jonah. So in the literary context, Jesus has just performed 2 spectacular miracles. He's first cured a man with a withered hand, but because he did it on the Sabbath, the scribes and Pharisees take issue with it. It can't be from God because it was done on the wrong day. And then he does an exorcism, and they say, well, no, that can't be from God because, you did this by the power of Satan. So Jesus is really quite perturbed at this. He calls them evil, the evil generation. He calls them serpents of the devil, as I recall. Brood of vipers, that's what it is. And then some scribes and Pharisees, then right after this, come and say, we want to see a sign from you, teacher. And Jesus gives this response, well, no sign will be given to this evil and wicked generation except the sign of Jonah. And as Jonah was in the belly of the sea monster for 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. And then he mentions how the men of Nineveh and the queen of the south will rise up at the judgment and condemn this evil and wicked generation because something greater now is here. And they repented when they were like Nineveh. When Jonah went to Nineveh and preached a message of repentance, they heeded that message and turned from their sins. So that's basically the context that we have there. And so first, I think we need to talk about what is a sign, the semeion. And it's an outward distinguishing mark. In the Old Testament, you've got the mark of Cain, or you've got the mark of circumcision. You've got the mark in the sky, the rainbow that God gave subsequent to the flood as his signature mark about the flood, his promise never to destroy the world again by water. So it's an outward distinguishing mark that strikes the eye. That's what usually a sign is. It's the kiss of the kiss of Judas when he led the soldiers to arrest Jesus and identify who the Lord was. It's the Star of Bethlehem. It's the burning bush. It's an outward distinguishing mark. In antiquity, a soldier would put a mark on his shield, and that would distinguish it from the shield of other soldiers. Or an admiral on a ship might have a flag, and that was his outward distinguishing mark. That was his ship. So a sign is usually an outward distinguishing mark of some kind. And of course, it's interesting that on the Shroud of Turin, we have all these marks of scourging, the marks of the particular wounds of crucifixion, and the abrasions on the scalp. And so certainly this ghostly image could be referred to as a sign, as an outward distinguishing mark, strikes the eye. It certainly seems to qualify in that regard, the very definition of a sign. So we have a number of proposed solutions, explanations for this. Some say, well, it's John the Baptist. Some say, well, it was Peter. His name is Simon Bar Jonah, son of Jonah. Maybe it's his confession, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Some will say, well, it's the dove that came upon Jesus at his baptism. Jonah means a dove. Simon Bar Jonah. But all of these have problems. In particular, they do not deal with the timeline, 3 days and 3 nights. Now, sometimes people get tripped up on this. They take it literally, but it's an idiomatic expression. We would say on the 3rd day he was raised. He'd been in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights. Any part of a day or night was just spoken of idiomatically as a day, a full day. We know they were partial, that Matthew himself only has Jesus in the tomb for 2 full nights. But idiomatically could be spoken of as 3 days and 3 nights. And that timeline comes directly from the story of Jonah, from the book of Jonah, I think, as I recall, chapter 2, verse 1. So those are some proposed solutions that they all have a problem. But I would suggest, Guy, that the solution really isn't that difficult if we ask the right question. On another podcast a year or two ago, a well-known professor, if I said his name, people would recognize him. He's a world expert on the resurrection. And he was invited to discuss one of my papers with me. Well, this one, I think it was, which is recently revised. But he took a look at at this text in Matthew chapter 12. He said, well, there's nothing there about a shroud. And I'm not an exegete. That's not really my expertise. So a wonderful professor, wonderful gentleman. But I would suggest, yeah, explicitly, there's nothing there about a shroud. But cryptically, I believe there is. And our best clue is the explanation that Jesus left us. As Jonah was in the belly of the sea monster for 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. And so I would ask your listeners to think about a question. When and where was Jesus during those 3 days and 3 nights? When and where was Jesus? So I think most people would say, well, he was in the tomb. I think that would be the common, his body was in the tomb. We could, debate, well, had he gone down to Hades and rescued, when did that take place? But basically, this in the heart of the earth is a metaphor for death. And so he was in captivity within the tomb, just as Jonah was in captivity. But I would respond that if your answer to this question, when and where was Jesus during those 3 days and 3 nights when he was in the heart of the earth? I think that's the best question we can ask exegetically.
Mm.
If your answer is he was in the tomb, I would say, yes, that's truthful, but it's incorrect. That's not the correct answer. And the reason I say that is because that would be like saying Jonah was in the ocean during those 3 days and 3 nights. Now that's truthful. He was in the ocean, but Jesus did not say as Jonah was in the ocean. He said as Jonah was in the belly of the sea monster. So when we look at it that way, we understand that there's really a twofold captivity. And you can think of 2 concentric circles. There's a smaller circle within a larger circle. There's a small captivity within a larger captivity. And so typological, and that's what this is, it's a typological metaphor. There's parallels to the ministry of Christ and the ministry of Jonah, both sent with a mission of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. Jesus said, I came to seek and to save that which was lost. Jonah was sent to Nineveh to rescue the lost. And they both experienced a twofold captivity. So if we're going to talk about typology, which is what this text involves, there's a twofold captivity, and it parallels Jesus. The heart of the earth for Jesus is the burial shroud. He's wrapped like a prisoner in this burial shroud as Jonah was confined to the belly of the sea monster. And Jonah is also within the larger ocean, and Jesus is in the tomb. So typologically, there is this perfect meshing of Jesus being in the shroud and Jonah being in the belly of the sea monster, and they're both within a larger confinement. And as Jesus is rescued from the shroud and the tomb, so Jonah is released from the sea monster and the ocean. Isn't it exciting and wonderful that and challenging for us here that at the very time and place that Jesus speaks of a sign that will appear in the future regarding his 3 days and 3 nights in the burial shroud, that we have this burial shroud with an image on it of a crucified man. And so I think it meshes perfectly. Their timeline, they have a divinely appointed mission to call sinners to repentance. They're held captive within the inner of two compartments, and they're both rescued by the hand of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, it's the best, most plausible solution to any others that have come along. And I think it shows an awareness, because here's what I would suggest too, and I tend to just keep talking. I'm sorry, you probably want to ask questions, but I think it's important to note that Matthew must have been aware of the shroud's existence. That is, Matthew was aware of the solution to this riddle. Today, you read the commentaries, and they'll say, "Well, this is a puzzle." They'll say, "This is a riddle." One recent article, an in-depth article on the Shroud of Turin. See if I've got that. He called it. Yeah, John Chrysostom in the 4th century said it's a dark saying.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
One of the critical commentaries says we are thus reduced to making educated guesses.
Yeah, but I think, but your point though of the 3 days, the time, and that differentiating that from any of the other possible references that you mentioned, the 3 days is just so specific. And it's so specific as to the Friday,
Yes.
being in the tomb, and on the Sunday coming out of the tomb. It really does. That parallel, I think, is probably the strongest. And then I think, to your point as well, is in Matthew. Why would he say it, and why did he say it twice, and why did Jesus reference it? If he didn't already know what the future was going to be. He knew he was going to be 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the beast, so to speak, in the belly of the shroud inside of the tomb.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. We have exactly when and where Jesus said a sign was promised, and we have this image then coming about. And what I wanted to say was that Matthew would never have recorded this typological metaphor and done so twice if he was not aware of the solution. Yeah, we think Matthew was written decades. Some think the 80s, the 90s, but maybe as early as the 60s. But we're still talking about 30 years after the cross. How is it that he would write about this if it was still a puzzle or a riddle, or some would say that a false prophecy, it never came about? Only if Matthew understood the meaning of it would he have included it. It wasn't a false prophecy. It actually came about, and Matthew knew what it was, but he spoke of it in a cryptic, hidden way. Now, we need to go further, because the way sign is used in the fourth gospel and the way it's used here is quite different. And so I think we need to touch upon that if we could.
Let me just go back to one thing though that you said there, and one of the things that I liken to, you have the experiences of the disciples with Jesus, and then you have this incredible experience of the resurrection. And so when I think about, how could I remember exactly what happened if I were Mark or, any of the writers? How could I remember exactly what happened, 30 years ago when I'm going to start to write it down? And I think about, and a question to everybody is, where were you when the World Trade Centers were attacked? And I can describe that explicitly. It's so vivid in my mind. I know exactly where I was. I know exactly seeing the smoke coming out of the towers, and I could describe that. If I had to write it down, I know exactly what happened. And it's already 24 years since then. And so here you have, Mark and Matthew and all the gospel writers, 30 years later, 40 years later, they are able to write that exactly because they experienced it, firsthand. How could you, the impression that made on your mind, not to mention the fact that, of course, it's God breathed, but the impression that Jesus being with you on your mind is going to last for the rest of your life. And so then for them to be able to talk about something very specific, and then to be able to say, in this case, the sign of Jonah being in the, the belly of the beast, or, Jesus, being in the tomb for 3 days, that's something that they're going to be able to write about and talk about forever. That's just the way our mind works.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I can remember where I was when JFK was assassinated. I was in the fourth grade, but
Yeah.
there's those special moments in your life that you just don't forget. You know right where you were, and
Yeah, I don't talk about that one because it gives away my age.
yeah.
I
Okay, so
Yeah,
good
so
point.
let's get back to your story.
Okay. So we talked about the definition of a sign being an outward distinguishing mark, but it's very important that we consider how this sign served Matthew, because it serves his purposes differently than how, for example, John will speak of the shroud in his first epistle or in the gospel when he refers to signs. Sign in the Gospel of John is for faith. It's evidence for faith. These signs were written that you might believe that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And I would suggest that's not the purpose of which this sign of Jonah serves within this pericope in this passage. So I want to touch on that for just a moment. It's not a sign for faith here. And the clue is that we have two witnesses that are mentioned about testifying against this evil and wicked generation that will crucify their Messiah. In the passage, he speaks of the men of Nineveh and the queen of the south will stand up at the judgment and condemn this evil and wicked generation, because if they had the privileges and of what they had witnessed in Christ's ministry, they didn't have as much and they repented. This evil, wicked generation have no excuse for the way they treated their Messiah. So the question becomes then, okay, what purpose does this serve, or how does it relate to the sign of Jonah? And what I would suggest is that the sign of Jonah in this passage is the Lord's witness, his testimony against this evil and wicked generation. The Old Testament talks about how a crime needs the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, that no single witness is enough to convict someone. So the sign of Jonah is a sign that is God's own witness against this evil and wicked generation. And the 2 witnesses that are mentioned in the text serve in support of God's own witness, so it doesn't stand alone. So we've got 3 witnesses this way. So it's not given as a sign for faith as we might use it today. It's a great apologetic. It strengthened my faith. The Lord brought an atheist into my life, and he's now in the church band. He does the drums. It was the shroud that brought him to faith, him and his wife. So it's a great apologetic, and there's places we can go, particularly in the writings of John, to support that. But here in Matthew, it's not a sign for faith. It's a sign of judgment, a sign of a witness. It serves as a witness, God's own witness against this evil and wicked generation. Because when you see the ghostly image on the shroud, you want to say, well, wow, who is this? And what crime did he commit that he underwent such torture? Was he guilty of this capital offense, whatever it was? And when we think about, well, this was Jesus, these unique wounds like the abrasions on the head, there's only one person in history recorded that we know of has all these particular marks of crucifixion and scourging. And so we know he was tortured like this unjustly. And so this image then is God's own testimony towards that, his witness against that evil and wicked generation. You see, in Israelite history, there are a number of occasions when an object served as a witness against the people turning away from the covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is actually called the witnesses, the box of witnesses. And so inside you had the tablets of stone, the jar of manna, and Aaron's rod that budded. And these all served as witnesses regarding God's covenant, how he was faithful and loving to them and provided them with food, but also witnesses against them when they would turn from the covenant. And I think it's fascinating when a person considers the similar typology between Aaron's rod that budded and the burial shroud of Christ. Aaron's rod, when you go back to the book of Numbers, it was first used in the Exodus in the miraculous plagues. It played a role there. But as they wandered in the wilderness, there came a time when the high priesthood of Aaron was challenged by Korah and other leaders of the 12 tribes, and they questioned the authority of Moses and Aaron. And God opened up the earth and swallowed Korah's family and the leaders who were instigating that rebellion. The next day, the people come before Moses and Aaron. They say, "Hey, you're guilty. For those people are dead, and it's your fault." And God sends a plague, and before it can be stopped with incense, many people have died. And here's what the Lord says. He says, Moses, I want you to tell the princes of the 12 tribes, let the prince of each tribe bring a staff. So there's 12 staffs. And he says, put them in the tent of meeting. And they do that. They spend the night, these walking sticks, spend the night in the holy place. And then in the morning, to their amazement, Aaron's rod has budded. It's come back to life. It's got almonds and blossoms. And that's God's miraculous sign that Aaron is his divine high priest. Now, in the book of Hebrews, which is one of the other passages I exegete in my book, I believe there's 4 references to the Turin shroud in the book of Hebrews dealing with typology. It's linked with the holy place of the Messianic tabernacle and the common wall, the curtain that separated the holy place from the most holy place. And it says, when his flesh went through the curtain, he entered the heavenly sanctuary. In Hellenistic Judaism, as we learned from Josephus and particularly Philo down in Alexandria, Egypt, the curtain of the temple was regarded as the boundary between earth and heaven, the material world and the heavenly realm. And John in his gospel speaks of how the Word was with God and the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. And he will say in his first epistle, this is how you test whether a spirit is from God or not. If he confesses that Jesus came in the flesh, he passed through the curtain, the incarnation, and he took on flesh. And here we have just the opposite in the book of Hebrews. As a high priest, he is in the holy place, which is his shroud. It's the tabernacle is a tent, a place of covering, a place of abode. And at the resurrection, his flesh went through the shroud, which was symbolic of the curtain, and went into the heavenly place. And Aaron's rod is mentioned just a few verses earlier. And then you've got the next statement, of these things we can now speak in detail. Mm-hmm. You say, well, why not? Because the discipline of the secret. We can't reveal these things. But there's this amazing typology, a similarity between Aaron's rod that's put in the tabernacle overnight and comes back to life, and the burial shroud that is put into the shroud. And on resurrection morning, they discover to their amazement, it's come back to life. There's this image and no body's there. And John affirms this theology of the shroud in his gospel when he says, when Mary looked in the tomb, she saw 2 angels, one at the head and one at the foot, where the body had been lying. So that what he's saying there is that the tomb was a earthly type of the most holy place, the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, where his body laid. And the book of Hebrews would say that the first compartment, the holy place, is the shroud. And John is saying, oh, yeah, I agree with that. And the tomb itself is the most holy place, symbolically. And so again, we have a 2-compartment typology with the shroud, just like this, the story of Jonah. There's a 2-fold compartment. There's the burial shroud and the tomb, and then there's the fish and the ocean. And so we see that in the early church, there was the shroud theology. In 2 ways, there was a double compartment. So sign, I guess what I wanted to say, Guy, was on this witness. Can you bring up Joshua Stone? There's a story that Moses, at the end of his life, they went to Shechem, and there's a mountain on each side, Ebal and Gerizim. That's how you pronounce those 2. And as I recall, half the tribes on one, half's on the other. And they repeat the curses and the blessings in Deuteronomy chapter 28. Now later Joshua comes there when they've come into the wilderness, and he says, choose for yourself this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And he gets them to recommit themselves to the covenant. And as they recommit themselves to the covenant, he takes a large stone. And archaeologists, we believe archaeologists have actually found this witness stone, a Mesera. They've actually found this at Shechem in the archaeological work. He'll say in the, in the book of Joshua, I believe it is, after Gideon has died, they fall away from the covenant. And this witness stone, when it was erected by Joshua, says, now this stone is going to be a witness. It's heard your confession, your commitment to the covenant. And if you ever fall away from it, this stone is going to be a witness against you. The same type of thing is said about the Aaron's rod that budded. Moses tells Aaron that we're going to put that in the Ark of the Covenant, that it'll serve as a sign against those rebels. It's going to remind future generations about that rebellion of Korah, where they challenged the high priesthood of Aaron. And in the same kind of teaching, the writer of Hebrews is saying that the shroud bears witness to Christ's high priesthood. And it serves, much as Aaron's rod does, it serves as a witness against that evil and wicked generation, which is what I believe the passage is teaching in Matthew about the sign of Jonah. There's a picture of the witness stone, the actual, we believe that's the actual stone that was carved with probably the Ten Commandments, and this witness against the Israelites when they went astray many years after it was erected, as a witness against them breaking the covenant. Does that make, did I make sense on all of that, you think, Guy?
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely makes sense. One thing on the parallel as you were speaking and as I was reading the paper the other day, when, so Jonah, he was sent he was commissioned to go by God, he was commissioned to go to Nineveh and save the people there. Now, he didn't want to go. And that's then why he went out to sea. He went in the complete opposite direction, got on the ship, and then of course he falls in the water, and then the Leviathan or the beast takes him back after 3 days. Now, on the other hand, though, Jesus did want to go. I mean, I guess maybe in the Garden of Gethsemane you could say, well, do I really have to do this? And God says, yes, you have to. And then from the Garden of Gethsemane, as he's bleeding, and sweating blood, and then he realizes, yes, I now need to, make my ascent to the cross, and and the suffering that I'm going to go through. Do you see that is there some kind of a parallel there that I might be missing?
Well, I think you clarified that probably as well as can be. The only thing I would say is we don't want to push the typology more than it was intended. So I'm not saying, I would not say that in every aspect the ministry of Jonah and Christ paralleled each other, because Christ was the perfect servant and Jonah was imperfect. So you mentioned, yes, this hesitation, drops of blood, but yet your will be done. He didn't go in the opposite direction. He went forward as the perfect servant. The perfect servant. But there are enough touching points of this typology that the timeline and the twofold captivity, and they both have a ministry of calling sinners to repentance. There's those major touching points, and that's all, in my view, that's focus on. We could push it more than it's intended in other aspects.
And I think even as a kid for myself, that timeline is just so critical. Jonah in the belly of the beast for 3 days and nights, and Jesus in the belly of the tomb or the belly of the shroud for 3 days and 3 nights. I think that that's so incredibly parallel. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, one thing we possibly could add to it. And again, maybe this is pushing it further than it's supposed to be. But in Luke's account of there's one other writer that speaks of the sign of Jonah, and that's Luke. And as I recall, he doesn't mention 3 days and 3 nights, but he says, as Jonah became a sign, so will the Son of Man. And so you wonder, okay, how did Jonah become a sign to the Ninevites? And I thought, well, what would make a foreign people accept the testimony of this Jew. You know, if I was a preacher, went over to Russia or to China and said, God has called me here to tell you guys you better repent or he's going to destroy your country, they may have some prejudice against Americans. Why would they believe me? You see? Was there something about the appearance of Jonah? Now, the shroud has this ghost-like appearance, image. And I've just wondered, and again, this is just conjecture on my part, did perhaps the stomach acid of the whale, the sea monster, did it bleach his skin white? Did his face, his appearance, have some strange look to it? And his explanation was, yeah, I just came from the whale, you know, and God gave me this mission and I ran. And that caused them to believe his testimony, something about his appearance, maybe. Now, the thing that's fascinating about this, and I'll just go a bit further, the second reference that we have in Gospel of Matthew, 4 chapters later, has this perplexing riddle. When the Pharisees and the Sadducees come and they say, we want to see a sign from heaven, here's his answer. When it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, there will be a storm today, for the sky is red and threatening. Do you know how to discern the appearance of the sky, but cannot discern the signs of the times? An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and a sign will not be given except the sign of Jonah. He left them and went away. What are we to make of this strange riddle about you can tell the weather by the appearance of the sky, but you can't discern the signs of the time? And what's fascinating about that, it's a synonymous parallelism, this poetry. There's two lines that are in parallel to each other. He says the same thing two ways. And when you match it up, the word appearance, prosopon, matches up with sign. You can discern the appearance of the sky, but you can't discern the signs of the times. Signs lines up with appearance. And what I find fascinating about that is that the word appearance, prosopon, has a double meaning. It often is not translated appearance, but face. And so one chapter later, you have the face of Jesus becoming bright like the sun and his clothes becoming white. The story of the transfiguration. Is this second recording of the Sign of Jonah story, is it a clue to the discerning reader? When sign is paralleled with appearance or face, and the most prominent part of the image is the face. And we have the story of the transfiguration, which has several touching points on shroud theology. So anyway, I find that kind of, maybe that's a clue. And the reason we're given that second mentioning is he gives us a hidden clue about what the sign is.
Yeah.
It's about the image, and particularly the face.
So here he is, Matthew is writing a little bit cryptically when it potentially references the shroud, and that's because of the discipline of the secret. The other thing that was going on at that time is the Jews were starting to rebel, maybe softly at first, maybe more so certainly, and then in 70 AD was when they, really, went to war. I wonder if Matthew and maybe some of the other writers, if they're writing it about that time, they realized that they had to be very cryptic as to how they wrote, because they didn't want to, they certainly didn't want the shroud to be destroyed and what have you. So the discipline of the secret may have gotten really strong at that time, and so then therefore the writing got to be that much more cryptic.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I'm glad you brought that up about the destruction of Jerusalem, because my thesis about the Sign of Jonah metaphor here and its solution, and that it's a witness. It's not a sign for faith, but it's a witness against that generation, how they unjustly crucified their Messiah, how they treated their Messiah. That fits in the context of the judgment and the condemnation of the men of Nineveh and the queen of the south that's in the text. But as you would hint to, it fits right in the broader context of Matthew in chapters 23 and 24, twice he mentions this generation, which in the Sign of Jonah, he says, this evil generation, this evil and wicked generation. In chapters 23 and 24, Jesus weeps over Jerusalem because they have rejected him, and God has sent him, and yet he's being rejected, and he knows that destruction is coming for them. Not one stone upon another, that temple is going to be destroyed. See, and so it all fits in the whole broader motif here of this condemnation upon that generation. I'm not being anti-Semitic. I'm not saying, today we should blame the Jews living today. It's judgment upon that generation of this innocent man being crucified, and it's a warning to them, and it's God's witness when he destroys the city decades later, due perhaps then to the way they treated the Messiah.
Yeah, potentially.
Does that make sense? The whole motif of God's judgment upon this nation, upon this generation, and his witness is the image on the shroud.
And and those parallelisms, are so strong and interesting, and and so I think it certainly adds to the whole story of the shroud and being a witness, and then the sign of Jonah, and like you said, the 3 days, and being inside the belly as being inside the shroud. That really does make a lot of sense. We've got about 5 more minutes. Tell us, we're going to set up another talk, which is on another paper that you have that's called Can I Get a Witness? And tell us, just give us a real little teaser on that so that we can, tee up another interview.
Yeah. Well, okay, so there's 3, even 4 major hidden references that I treat. I treat maybe 10 different passages in my book, but there's 4 that I would call major. And 3 of these particularly really show us that the early church had the shroud in their possession. They knew of this image. We don't just have science today and historical artifacts like the Pray manuscript or the Sidarium of Oviedo. The biblical text itself affirms for us that the early church had this burial shroud with this image on it. Now, one of the passages that we hope to do in the future is found in 1 John chapter 5. In verse 6, it says, "This is the one who came by water and blood, not by the water only, but by the water and by the blood, Jesus Christ. And it is the Spirit who bears witness, because the Spirit is true." And there's 3 that are bearing witness in the present tense: the Spirit, the water, and the blood. And these 3 are one, or they are in agreement. And the one, if we are receiving the testimony of men, the testimony of God is greater. And this is the testimony of God, that he testified concerning his Son. So the question is, what is this testimony that God testified concerning his Son? And the tense is very important there. And then this opening verse, "This is the one who came by water and blood." What does he mean by that? I believe he's talking about the spear wound that he mentions in the gospel. And this is his own testimony that this burial cloth is genuine. They were aware of this image, and he uses that to support the humanity of Christ. There's a heresy in Ephesus where John is writing to his readers, and where some have denied the humanity of the incarnation of Christ. And so it's an important text, but again, it'll bear witness that John knew about this burial cloth and the image that exists today on it.
Yeah.
And it's
I think so.
Translated. Yeah, we've not translated that opening verse right. That's a very perplexing verse, probably the most perplexing statement that John makes, at least in his epistles.
Yeah, and I think, and I've used that as well. He came by water and the blood, and I think that is definitely a direct reference to how he, when he was pierced for our transgressions, while he was on the cross, that there was water and blood that did come out, and so that I think that's definitely the case.
And Guy, normally that's understood to be the baptism of Christ and the crucifixion. That's the most popular interpretation, but I'm saying no, that's wrong. That's not correct. It's the spear wound.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see that. Larry, we're going to break it here. We're going to do the other paper, Can I Get a Witness, separately. So where can folks find out more about your book, the A Divine Testimony for the Resurrection?
Yeah, thank you, Guy. It's on Amazon, but if you go to my website, there's a 30% discount code right now. I don't know how long that'll be, but it is effective now. My website is theincredibleshroud.com. Theincredibleshroud.com.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. So the book again is A Divine Witness for the Resurrection by Larry Stalley. You can find it on his site. Larry, thank you so much. Please go ahead and purchase his book. His papers are fascinating, and mine is underway as well. So we're looking forward to digging into that in a big way and really understanding how these different verses in the Bible refer to not just that they could have different meanings, and certainly when you put them all together, then they seem to really reference the shroud, and while obeying the discipline of the secret. Larry, thank you so much. And then for the audience, yeah, absolutely. And please stay tuned for other videos in this series on the backstory of the Shroud of Turin. And otherwise, please visit GuyPowell.com and sign up for more episodes. Larry, again, thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. Thank you, Guy.